I will. Do. Keep an eye on. Hey, everybody. Hey, folks, joining early keeners. Ready for an awesome session with Samantha today from Mentimeter. I'll put this this little banner up, but we're going to kick off at 12:05, and we'll just chit chat in the meantime. How you doing, Samantha?
I am so excited to be here. Thank you.
Nice. What is got any new and exciting adventures planned for the summer?
Oof, good question. Well, we have our Menti days. So Mentimeter, the entire company comes together and our headquarters in Stockholm. So we have all the people from our Toronto office, all the people from our Sydney office that all come together for some strategy days and also like a good celebration of the work we've done in the past year. So I'm heading to Stockholm in August and I'm very excited.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you?
Have already done a little bit of cottaging, which is nice.
The weather's finally here for it.
Yep. I took my 5-year-old daughter golfing on that cottage trip, and she had an okay time, but like it was like Muskoka and the bugs were out like crazy. She got like horse flies like crazy, and she was like, I want to go home after like the 5th hole, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, let's do that. Yeah. So yeah, nothing crazy. It's gonna be a local summer this year, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Have you been to Amsterdam before?
Yes. Well, I went to Stockholm during kind of like my onboarding. Yeah, no, that's fine. And during my onboarding.
Yeah.
So, but that was my first time, and it was February, so very short days.
Okay.
Because it's quite dark there. And then actually midsummer is Friday. So our office will be doing some celebrations here for midsummer. It's a huge holiday for Swedes. So longest day of the year coming up on Friday. And I think it'd be very nice to be there when it's like light and sun and like getting to kind of enjoy all of that. So I think everyone says I'll experience a different Stockholm than
Amazing.
Still beautiful, but now warm.
Warm and brighter.
Yeah. So that'll be really
nice.
Those
are key things. Yeah. I've always joked that our family never gets to go to Montreal in the summer. Like we always just end up being in Montreal during the winter, and it's a very different experience. Those winters are not friendly. So yeah.
I didn't know you had a 5-year-old. I also have a 5-year-old daughter.
Oh yeah. I got a 5-year-old and a 3.5. She's they're a blast in the glass. Yeah. Keep me busy. Keep me on my toes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we're getting close. We'll give it 2 more minutes for the folks that are eagerly awaiting to dive into today's topic. We just usually start a few minutes later just to give folks time. Today is exciting because we're going to be using, for those of you who have been to previous TPPG presentations like this, we're going to be using a different platform, the Mentimeter platform, to engage with today's conversation, which Samantha will be giving some more detailed instructions on. If for any reason that's you've got 2 methods, we're going to try that way. There is a little bit of a lag, so we'll probably have to like pause a bit, and we've got some contingencies in place to make sure that it's still an engaging conversation. We can interact with the folks that are here. Any high level thoughts beyond that, Samantha, that I might be missing from our pregame?
No, I think that's it.
Cool. Yeah, so let's give this a go. So today we're covering the great unlearning, helping teams ditch outdated practices. And Samantha, again, thank you for being here today and representing Mentimeter and their awesome tool, which we've used many times now since, just as an organization. And I guess maybe just kind of give the folks at home an understanding of who you are, where how you got to where you are, and your time at Mentimeter, and then we can kick things off and you can take it away.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for inviting me and to join you today. Yes, I feel I've gotten to really know the people group over the last 6 months. So I actually joined at Menti in December 2024. So I am still relatively new on my journey, and I lead our people and culture team here in North America. So I do a lot of PG work, which is what we call it internally, but it's similar to HRBPs at other organizations. So a lot of leadership strategy, succession planning, kind of that viewpoint. But on my team, I work with our people operations and HR generalist. I work with talent acquisition, and I work with our office experience. So that kind of all comes together for what we do here. And it's interesting because our office here has about 50 folks, but we are part of Menti as a global organization, and we have about 350 folks sitting in Stockholm. And we have a much larger P&C team there. There's about 15 people, and our centers of excellence really sit there. So we're a regional office kind of supporting a global strategy and global initiatives. And then we have an office in Sydney with 15 people that just opened 2 years ago. So that's a little bit about Menti.
Awesome. No, it's we don't get the distinct luxury of having a fellow people and culture person on these panels every time. So that's another reason for us to be extra excited, because you're coming at this from the lens of people, right?
Yes.
This is your day in, day out. Quick icebreaker, just like, how did you fall into the people and culture space?
Oof. How did I fall? And it really was, a good descriptor, fell. Interesting for me, my academic background is actually in adult education.
Okay,
And I worked in higher education for 10 years at University of Toronto.
amazing.
So adult learning and adult education was really kind of how I came to be.
Hmm.
2021, thinking I'm ready for a career change. I'm ready for a career shift. I want to kind of like do a new chapter, try something new. And I came and joined Verifin, which is a Canadian tech company, in an L&D role. So it was so kind of translating what I had done, but in the tech environment. So I really started in learning and development.
Yeah.
And I worked in that space for a while. And then through that, we were acquired by NASDAQ. And then I joined a 250 people global team and so many more opportunities, I would say, to be so much more specialized.
Yeah.
And so then I moved over to the benefits side of the house and I worked in well-being and benefits globally. And I learned about leaves and so many different kind of like ins and outs. And that's really where my love, I think, for like PNC or HR generalization started, like all the different things. So I came in through learning and development, and then like just I call it planned happenstance, like right place, right time, right team, right organization, right movement, that I got exposed to kind of all of these other things, which is why Menti is such like this perfect place for me. Because as you mentioned, like for me, it's me as a people person,
Yeah.
and our culture really is so people growth driven, but
Yeah.
then also our tool is all about what we do. So when I had the opportunity to kind of bring those things together, it's not often that I think we can feel so confident in the products that we have in tech in the same way that we do. Like I was mentioning to you today, we use Menti every day. Like I use it multiple times every day to do my job better
Yeah.
as a people person. So it's kind of a really interesting connection for me.
If I was a recruiter helping Mentimeter hire for the people and culture role, and I saw your resume, my mind, like I would be like shaking. I'm like, I found the perfect one. I got to show them immediately. Like the L&D background, like previously, and then like in adult education, like it makes so much sense. So that's really cool, and I'm imagine you're pretty jazzed about it. So it shows as well. So that's cool. Thanks for that. Thanks for that deep dive there. I'll let you take it away, and I'll just be in the background here. So yeah, over to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yes, so we are here today to talk about outdated practices. And one of the things that's so important for me as a facilitator is to make sure that I am making the session as relevant and the most meaningful for everyone who has joined today. So I am going to use Menti as our tool to help me frame our discussions and actually kind of like take this conversation where it needs to go for our time together. So if everyone wants to join the Menti, you can do that through scanning the QR code here, or you can log on to menti.com and you can put in that code, and that will bring you to this session. A little bit about joining this Menti is it is anonymous by default. So everyone that signs up, it won't like take your information. I don't see who participates or who asks what question. It's just letting me be able to do like a pulse and a temp check with everyone in the room to help inform what I do next. as we mentioned, there's a moment of a lag. So we're going to do this as our best together to make sure everyone's joining in and has a moment to that. So I'll leave this here for a moment while people sign in, and then I will move us to our next slide here.
And I checked it out just to like a quick pop in on that, but the lag is not too bad. I think we got about 20, 30 seconds. I'm seeing some thumbs up there. So we've
Brilliant.
got folks there. So yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. So what I'll do then for this one is I'll keep the QR code up. So if you come join us and find us the slide, you can still continue to add. I see a few people here. I'm really curious to know, why did you decide to join this session today? You saw the topic, you saw the presenter, and you were like, this is a really meaningful use of my, could be lunch, depending on, I guess, where in the world you're located. It's lunch for me. But my 30 minutes, my hour today, I'd love to hear from you about why you are here.
Do I put
And
the
as
music
I
on?
give her, oh yeah, sure. Oh, that's good.
No.
I see a few responses joining in. Perfect. And I am here because, as Martin said, I'm so excited to be able to connect with other people and talk about, to me, like some of these really important things that I find, for me, one of the biggest reasons why I don't unlearn things or do things differently is because of time. It's easier to just keep going as we're going than it is to pause, stop, and reflect. So I love these kinds of sessions because it really gives me the opportunity, as a facilitator, but also as a participant, to really dig deep, reflect, and think about change on something specific. So I'm excited to be here and have been asked. Let's see a few of our responses that have come in. Okay. Had nothing better to do. You know what? I'll take it. Here you are. I want to stay current. I love trying new things, and I want to know how to instill that love in others. Learning and growing, understanding what these old practices are to make sure we're staying up to date. Okay, I want to know which practices are outdated. I develop leadership learning and want to explore more ways to help leaders and teams get the most of their effort. Absolutely. I work in an organization that is super resistant to change, and they are all about upholding legacy practices. And I also see, love the idea that we need to, yes, sometimes we need to dump stuff. I say, like, sometimes it's what's our no list, what's our stop list is as important as what is our go list and what are we going to continue to do. So I hope that we touch on all of this today. I have a few ideas of outdated practices. I was chatting with Martin about this when we joined. I think there are so many. So I picked a couple that speak to me, but as we go through, if something else comes up, feel free to add it in the chat or a comment, and we can take that as well. And one other thing I want to mention is our Q&A function. So if throughout you have a question you want to ask, please feel free to put it in there. And I'm going to make sure we have lots of time at the end to get to everyone's questions. Amazing. Thank you, everyone. So I have one more question for you, is as we talk about unlearning, I feel that can be quite a buzzword. I have my own definition, but if you had to think of a word quickly, like what comes to mind when I say unlearning, or what did you expect when we were talking about unlearning? Got some thumbs up. Perfect. All right, may I put you on the spot to ask you what you think unlearning is while we wait for some of our other participants to join in?
Unlearning. Today is a very relevant day for me in terms of habits. And so I think it's easy to fall into habits and practices, and breaking them is not easy. There's like an entire bookshelf at chapters dedicated to this thing. So my take is it's rewiring your brain. That's my sort of like, and it's not an easy feat. I've done it a few times. Partially I don't know how, and I'm trying to rewire my brain on all the standard things like sleep hygiene, diet, exercise, and all that fun stuff, right? So yeah, that's what it means to me.
Thank you for that. I love that because I think it's so interesting how today we're talking about team practice and outdated practice, but unlearning for most of us, like how we start is like it's so deeply personal to us. Like, what do I need to unlearn to do a little bit differently? And I always think of unlearning as a little more active versus just like dismissing, stop doing, as we use those other words. It's like, what have I learned to do that I actually have to consciously unlearn before I'm ready to just do something else or try something else?
Yeah.
We're seeing some great words here. You mentioned rewiring, which I'm seeing is like one of the biggest words popping up. We've got rewiring, rethinking, why, breaking old ways, new perspective, open-mindedness, letting go of tradition, adopting new habits. Beautiful. Amazing. Okay, so here's my definition, my working definition when we talk about it with our teams here at Menti is it's really the process of actively letting go of, it could be old knowledge, something that was true before that now is different. It could be letting go of habits. And I think you mentioned that well when even you're talking about sleep and stress and diet and those kinds of things, but also what are our habits at work? What do we see happen? So how do we actively let go of that? Our assumptions, we all come with our whole backpack of assumptions. And I always say, like, I want to make sure everywhere I show up, I'm trying to have my most generous interpretation of what's happening. But it's actually a process of letting go of some assumptions of maybe things I've seen in the past to not just translate those onto something else I'm seeing, to really step in my bias and say, just because that was true before doesn't mean it's true now or again. And behaviors. Like, how do I unlearn those behaviors that are either no longer useful? So sometimes something was useful to us in a moment in time and now it's not, or they're no longer accurate. Things change, the world changes, our understanding and knowledge changes. So what may have been true before is not true now. And really the important part of this is like, yep, the unlearning is the active process of letting go. But when we do that, we're able to make more space for our new learning and our new perspectives. And I think sometimes we fall in this trap of go, 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 add, learn, grow, and forget about what have I learned along the way that I actually need to pass or let go of before I'm ready to create that new space. I'm seeing some feedback that you love this definition. Excellent. Yes. Me too, because I think it really engages us in the process of letting go and how important that is for us to really grow. So good. So now I have another question for you. These are 5 that I see a lot. As we said, there are so many kind of different practices, but I think these are kind of quick ones without kind of digging in so deep, but that I see on a regular basis. So one is like defaulting to, that should be 2 with 2 O's, I apologize, too long of meetings instead of async tools. Like our default is, we'll set a 50-minute meeting, we'll set a 45-minute meeting, we'll set an hour to discuss it, instead of thinking about what are some other ways we can do that. The second is relying on the loudest voices for decisions. And I really challenge us to think about that deeply, because I think when we see it, it's like, no, we wouldn't do that. But how often are you in a meeting and you're like, okay, what do you think about this? You wait, you get 2 or 3 comments. You're like, okay, sounds good. We're moving on. And that we end up kind of relying on that. This idea about believing more time is better results. So the more and more and more we put into something, we must be getting a better results out of that. Avoiding feedback because it's uncomfortable. And then also, they're moving around. And now I want to make sure I get to the last one. It was equating busyness with productivity. Yes. So this idea that like, I'm always locked in, I'm always on, I'm going. That must mean I am at like my highest level of productivity, and really challenging that mindset to say like busyness is not productive. So I see these coming in here. I'm going to give it another moment for things to weigh in. Martin, can I invite you again while we do that? If you want to maybe share what you would rank as your top 1 or 2?
It's not avoiding feedback, because I have the good fortune of having a previous CPO, Lorena Scott, who said like drilled in. I unlearned that feedback is a gift. So that's a mental model that I shifted, and so now it's like I seek it out, like just constantly trying to get it at every. It's almost annoying at this point. But for me, the things that I think the thing that I need to unlearn is the believing more time equals better results. Like that's my pitfall, I would say.
Yeah. Amazing.
But it's cool to I haven't seen this particular slide live, and it
Yeah.
reminds me of those cool things. It's like, what's the most popular console, and like Xbox and Nintendo, just like they've done a bunch of like animated gifs of it. It's cool that this is underutilized slide. I'm gonna have to use this one.
Ooh. Well, and one thing I'll just on the Menti note, because there's still one or two coming in, and then I'll
Yeah.
voice over those, is there's a lot of power, and you'll see folks who use Menti hide the results, because the reason you do that is you don't want to like impact the group. You want everyone to have a minute to individually reflect, to say what they think, and then you can reveal them. Otherwise, it might be like, oh, someone else is saying that, maybe I should vote for that too. And so that's why we often hide. But like you said, sometimes I think it's interesting to see, to me, the reason, the power of sharing this here is that everyone has such different opinions. Like you can see things constantly moving before it settles in. And I think that that's kind of also like a fun visual to watch, and to
So
understand
cool.
that like it's not so clear everyone's on one. You still see them changing. Like
Yeah,
each person has such an impact in where we end up ranking.
love it.
So good. Feedback is something I'm coming across often in my work. It's hard for so many. Agreed. And I think here it was kind of open, whether that's about avoiding feedback for myself or whether it's like avoiding sharing feedback. And I think we can take it both ways there. But I agree. I think it's definitely something that I come across daily in the work that I do. And I often say, like, it's not a people thing to deliver feedback. It's a people thing to help leaders be prepared to deliver feedback and to help teach how we can do it in really effective and motivating ways, not to kind of like outsource it to the people folks, but to have people folks being at the front line of the best way we can deliver it for the highest impact and motivation. So I think that also is one that like comes up a lot in my work. Okay. So first one, relying on the loudest voices for decisions. Okay. So I think this one's really interesting because for me, my experience is that it's because it's default. We have kind of been operationalized that in meetings, we say something, we get a few folks, we sound good, we move on. Or people who tend to be really passionate take up a lot of space with their ideas. And then, as I mentioned with that groupthink, all of a sudden everyone's like, oh yeah, oh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. And they plus one. We're not necessarily challenging each individual to kind of like hold their own strong opinion. We're letting those folks who think out loud or take up a lot of space take the lead here. And so I actually, and this is not necessarily why this question was here, it's like, this was a huge reason why Menti was born, is like, how do we use tools in real time to make sure that we are balancing the voices around the table in terms of helping us make our decisions, not just reliant on a few of those people. And we give people time to internally reflect. I just want to make sure one second, sorry.
It's definitely a big problem in your startup that's scaled and hasn't really gone through any like leadership training, and everybody's kind of like in their first iteration of the company.
Yeah.
And it comes after the fact. So that resonates for sure.
Yeah, and I love that you say that, because it's like, I think this idea is that culture is built in, while we're starting scaling up, by these like few founders or people that are there. And it's like often folks say, we want to scale without losing our culture, right? So how do we do that? But it's the idea to me that like culture is actually a collective and shared responsibility. Like everyone is a culture carrier and every person contributes to the culture. It's not held in ownership by a few people. And I think that this is true for our decision making. It should be shared and delegated. Of course, there are moments where certain folks with domain expertise or leadership experience are making a call and setting the clear direction. But in a lot of cases, we can actually help with change management and buy-in when people get a chance to openly ask questions, contribute to what's happening, and feel like they're a part of it. And then as simple as team meetings, it's like, how are we making sure that everyone's voices are heard? And so I think that it's like part of our role is how do we create deliberate spaces for quieter voices. And so if we're in person, do I have them right here? Every office, we have this in every room. And one of our key ways we do it is we hand out Post-it notes and markers. And when we ask a question, we put a timer on and music on for 2 or 3 minutes and have people really think for themselves what they think about what's being shared before we start any kind of discussion. Because something else I find is that our folks, me included, who think out loud, end up like not even allowing the space for some people to process. So it's not even always about speaking up or not speaking up. It's about processing.
Yeah.
I think that that's a really effective tool, as well as pre-reads. Is there stuff that we can give people before that they can read and come prepared to have an opinion on? And it's hard to do this. It is hard to make this habit. This is definitely unlearning. It's not I'm making the agenda 2 minutes before I come into the meeting. It's I've said it a week before. People need to read this. They need to reflect, and they're coming ready to share their feedback. So I think those are kind of two of those tools. And then, of course, as you can see with Menti in real time, and this is how we do it, is hey, it could be open-ended. I want to hear everyone's opinion. It could just be a scaling. I think we're going this way. Let's check in. And then you can look at your scale and say, ooh, some people are at 0 and some people are at 10. It's worth having more of a conversation. Everyone's at an 8. We're good to go. So there's lots of different ways to do that. But I love that it's like, how can we prepare in advance and give people time to process? When we're in person together, how are we deliberately creating those spaces? And then when we're hybrid and online, how are we also using our tools? For Menti, it's interesting. We use it in person and online. Like for us, that's our default tool. But I think there's a lot of different ways we can do this and challenge those decisions.
I have a super quick question.
Please.
I'm sure you've heard like the Bezos model where like they set aside time in the meeting to read the pre-read. So
Yeah.
it's just sitting in the meeting, silently
Mhm.
reading them. I'm just curious with your background, what's your hot take on that approach? Like, are you like forget it's Bezos and Amazon.
Yeah.
It's just like, just in general, like the reason they did it was like nobody ever reads the pre-read.
Yeah.
So like we'll just set aside time. So 10 minutes out of the meeting is just quietly reading together in a room. What's your take on that approach?
My hot take, my
Yes.
spicy take. Then what's the point? We could voice over it or teach it the way that we've done it before. It's just a different way of reading it. To me, the value of the pre-read is giving people time to process.
Gotcha.
That's the whole, to me, that's like really the value. It's like
Oh.
I get to read it and think about it and ask a question and have time so that when I'm saying, what do you think about this? People have had time to really figure out their convictions. I think if you're reading it and then having an opinion 1 minute later, or if you're being presented and have an opinion 1 minute later, it's kind of losing the reason we're there, like why we're giving that. I
Yeah.
think what is hard and what the unlearning is how do we hold people accountable to having actually read that? And how do you make that part of your culture?
Yeah.
And I think it's like you have expectation of the way that you're talking about it. And I will say confidently that really happens here. Like you wouldn't want to come to a meeting without having read the pre-read.
It's
The
not
expectation is like pretty clear. And I actually think that started with our CEO and the MMM level, and then like our executive team level. And then you see it trickle throughout that's really what the expectation is. And even through our new strategy sessions, it's like you read this and then you come and you're ready to engage. You're ready to have an opinion, but you can do the work on your own time.
Yeah. Fair. No, thanks. Appreciate that. That's
my hot take. Everyone can do that a little differently. I see here like setting 10 minutes at the beginning of the team meeting agenda. So something I challenge my team is like you should have a reoccurring meeting in your own calendar where you're reviewing our team agenda, adding anything and getting ready the day before so that when we jump in, we're ready to go. So like how do you push and practice those things? And I think you can only do it if you really hold people accountable to it. But I think that is actually huge cultural shift. I say it easily now and like major unlearning because that's not how I see it happening in most places. But I would say the value of doing it is so great. Like you're really making the most of your time together. I actually think this touches on the too long meetings and async tools. It's like, what are you doing to make sure your meetings? I always say like, I want my meetings to feel like the best meetings of the month. Like people feel so good. And how do you do that? You feel like you're actually contributing and there's value of all being together. And so that's a way to do it.
Fair. No, thank you. Awesome
Yeah.
perspective.
Great question. And then the second one was one that you mentioned. So believing more time is better results. So we actually have one of our core values is work smart. And so we talk a lot about the 80-20 principle and this idea that you can get like 80% there with 20% of the effort. Like how do you kind of get to that really good enough draft and feel like you're in a good spot? But I think what's so special and so important about this is also saying, when is it worth the 100? When does perfection need to be there? And I think a lot of it, well, never perfection, but when does like very high standard need to be there? And I think there's a lot of the underlying thing to here to me is also about like prioritization. what are we saying is like good enough, and when are we saying like, no, this needs to be here, and are we being clear about that? Whereas I think sometimes it's we over index on making sure everything's at this level, and it's like, how much extra time are we spending on like a diminishing rate of return? And I think this is like a hard skill. I think that's why these are on here. Is like, if I just say this and everyone goes back to their desk and they're like, I've got it, but it's like, okay, so how are we being clear about priorities? Are those priorities aligned with our leadership? How are we making sure that folks know that? When are we praising that good enough is good enough? When are we like recognizing that there might be a gap in something because it is a draft, but we're okay with that? So I think that this is like an interesting one, which I guess kind of also ties into equating busyness with productivity. But I think this idea that you can actually probably get 80% of where you need to go with most projects in 20% of the time. And then knowing when to go that extra mile is a big one, just for how we operate. I don't know, Martin, if that touches, or if there's anything else you wanted to add to that, or if there was any other questions that came up around that for you.
No, none on my eye. None on my end. And no, it's great. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to think I think the other thing is this can help us with like long-term sustainability. Like when we talk about, I think in people roles a lot, what I think burnout is used like frequently, but to really bring it to this, like to light in this moment is that, are people operating? You can't sprint a marathon. Are we asking people to operate at a pace that's like unsustainable? When is it worth the sprint? When are we recovering? When are we doing different kinds of things? And I think there's a lot of that goes into this. It's not just like, the more I put in, the better I'm going to get. The more I put in, the better I'm going to get. If you run 7 days a week, you will burn out.
Yeah.
If you take rest days and recovery days, but you do different kinds of workouts and cross training, and you do all of this, and you actually prioritize with a coach what matters, you will end up with better results. That's the thing. It's not just about, it is about your own well-being, but to me, it's like the results improve when we take time to rest and we take time to say like, when does this, I joke that we sometimes use it as a verb, like, I've 80-20'd this. Like if I'm going into a meeting and I'm like, this is not all the way there, but I put in this much effort for what I think will help guide our conversation today. And like culturally saying, that's cool here. But then having someone challenge me like, I don't think you should 80-20 that. I think that needs a lot of extra time to get to where we need to go. And how do we hold each other accountable to those standards? And as leaders and through our culture, how do we help make sure those priorities are really clear for everyone?
No, that's I guess the thing to add to that is now with AI, it's almost as though like people are being asked to figure out how to 2x or 3x or 5x themselves from a productivity perspective, and that includes more time. So not only are you being sort of like, okay, well, this 100% used to be the expectation, but now we've got all these fancy tools, so you should be able to do 200%, and then you have to learn how to do that. And there is no, I've rarely do you see or hear organizations being just fantastic at giving people time and space to like do that type of work, really. So it's a challenging one, and makes sense that it would be so high on this list.
And to your point, what do we need to unlearn to be able to do that? Like, it's not like we can just tomorrow say, I'm going to do that. It's like, what are the habits that I have? What efficiency tools do I need to upskill on now? So I'm stepping back now and taking more times to do that to help scale myself in the future, right? It's like, what are these shorter term investments for longer term gain when we're still working at a pace like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like as we put these on today, these are not simple simple things to navigate, but it's like, where is this? And I'll get this to the end. Is like, what's one thing we can do to challenge some of these and like work with ourselves and our teams and our cultures at our companies and organizations to like take one step back and unlearning it, right? Or like it's like, to me, it's like, we will never be all the way done on these. These are all long continuums, but like, where can we take these little movements and culture shifts over time? But yeah, I think that one's really interesting, is like, how do folks are being asked to do more with less, and we're saying more time is better results. So how do we become so crystal clear on the results and the priorities to make sure they're actually getting what they need to shine, and what do we need to like let go of or learn to be able to do that? It's tricky.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. I'll ask you for timing and questions here. Do you think I should do one more, or should we go to the next?
I think yeah, we can go to the next, and I mean that's my personal take. But if folks chime in on Menti and they want to hear more and hear takes on third, fourth, or fifth, and
Yeah.
give them a few seconds to debate that. But we've still got a healthy number of folks watching. So thanks for
Okay.
sticking around. This is
Amazing.
super. I love. We've got to use Menti every. This cheesy. I shouldn't be, but like no, I've done so many of these webinars without Menti. This is the
Mm,
first time seeing it, and it works fantastically. So, yeah, um, yeah. Why don't we just plow forward? I would
let's
say,
do it.
yeah.
Okay, amazing. And if there's Q&A, I'll encourage everyone, you can drop it in. I can always touch on one of these, or if there was a specific part of it you'd hope we would talk about, we'll make some time. Um, I think we kind of actually already talked about this quite a bit, which is like, why is it so hard to unlearn? Because of all the complexities we just discussed. Because they are so deeply rooted in our habits and what we see in the kind of like expectations, societal expectations, cultural expectations, and that we default to it when we're pressed for time. And it has to have so much conscious effort. Like you hear this about habit building. It's like, you have to consistently do this for this long to build a habit, and you cannot do it for 3 days. And it's like, oh, I never did it. Like the amount of like conscientious time and effort I think it takes to do it is what makes it hard. And then I saw in the beginning when someone made a comment that like, is your culture ready for it? I think some cultures and some teams are ready to say, yes, let's do pre-reads and we're ready to hold each other accountable. And some folks are like, no, that's like not what's going to work culturally today for us. We need to build it into the beginning of the meeting. What's a baby step we can do towards it? So I think it's like that's the other piece. It's you, yourself, and what you're doing, but then it's also like the culture that you're situated in and where people are ready for it. Time.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this is it, right? Like, oh, this is so great for us all here today in this session. And then we get off and it's like we're back to our Slack or our Teams or our email. And it's like, how do we build in the time to do this?
Yeah, there's so many. I find that like aspirational changes I want to make end up becoming like this long list of bookmarks, right? It's like, oh, I should implement this. Oh, I should implement this. Oh, I should implement this. And then I've just become this hoarder of things I should be doing,
Oh my God.
like books, right? Literally like books. Like, oh, here's all these habits I want to form. People are mentioning habits as well. And it's like I buy the book, I don't have the time to read it, and let alone I'm sure there's a framework and a mental model that I need to implement in that book. And it's just like I should just keep doing my best and go that way. Yeah.
Mm. I don't know if you've read the book Four Disciplines of Execution. I
No.
just like really highly recommend it. It's interesting because it's meant for team strategy, but I think there's so much like personal that I took from it as well.
Oh, nice.
It basically talks about this concept of the whirlwind, and the whirlwind is like your job and what you do. And you basically, as much time as you give the whirlwind, it will take. Like you can work
Mm,
20 hours, 40 hours, 100 hours. It's like that takes it up. And so you have to, the whole idea is like gaining control of the whirlwind and trying to cut it back to 90%. And then in that 10%, being so strategic and so specific about what it is that you're going to do, you choose one at a time until you basically accomplish it. And then that ends up being part of your whirlwind for exactly what you said. It's like, how do I take this one thing and how am I going to measure it? What are my, it's like literally like, what are the milestones I'm going to do to get there? What are my bets? So I think this happens. How will I know when it's done? But if you don't carve it, it won't happen. And the idea is like, oh, I'll do it when I slow down. I'll do it when the work is done. People work is never done.
never.
Like it has limitless boundaries to the amount of times you could do it. But it's like, if I want to be better at that 90%, I have to advocate for why this 10% is a priority to myself, to my leader, to whatever it is, so that I know that I will be able to be more efficient with that 90% or be stronger at that 90% or whatever it is. So it's a great book.
Yeah. No, thank you. Awesome.
We're so accustomed to comfort and doing things that are not outside our comfort zone. Absolutely. We're so used to like, this works, this is what I've done. Or even if it doesn't work, it's like, this is what we do. And everyone's just used to it. I talk about some of those cultural things like, are you a company where naturally you start all meetings 5 minutes late because you expect people to come late from the last meeting? Or are you a company that people and 5 minutes early. Like there's so many things that are just like part of what we do. No one one day said, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to change all of our meetings to here. And so I think that it just like is naturally what reinforces the way we run our meetings. It's because you onboarded and you joined and you were in a meeting that way, and you go to another meeting and that's what happens. So it's like to unlearn and redecide how we're organizing meetings and what we're doing can be huge cultural undertakings. We're used to just doing what we do. And so my invitation too is like, not everything has to be a huge cultural undertaking. It can be like one small change for yourself or your team. And then kind of like have that viral loop effect, or see if it's even worthwhile to continue, or if you want to try something else. That I know for me, sometimes I get paralyzed in this idea of like, that feels too big of a mountain to fix right now. I'll worry about it later. Where it's like, what's one step, one change that might make a difference.
Yeah.
And then you might not have the support to change. And I think that's, So how do we use data and information, or like I was just talking about with that structure, to really say why this is so important and why it should be a priority? And that if things are working well, in your opinion, you're unsure about taking a risk. It's like, if things are good enough, why are we rocking the boat here?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's like, because big risks could mean big rewards. It could also mean big failures.
Yeah.
Right. And so like being open to that idea is like, it's quite risky.
That one resonates with me, just because I'm reminded of like the temptation to choose a new tool, like whether it's an HRIS or whether it's an ATS or anything. And you're like, oh, I'm using, like, there's new, email clients out there. Like I use Superhuman. I'm a huge fan of the Superhuman email client. It's very helpful. And there's new ones out there that are so much better that, like, I hear people saying, oh, it's so much better. It's like, I'm maybe it's not for me. And then it's just like sunk cost biased, I guess, right? Like you spend so much time investing into this thing that you're afraid to try the new thing.
Yeah. Great perspective. Thank you for that. Okay. So here's my question for you all now. Whether it was one of those 5 practices, whether it was one small part of one of the 5 practices we talked about, or maybe it's one that you brought with you today that we didn't talk about. You were saying, I have this outdated practice in mind. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I want you to think about, like, what are you going to commit to just challenging this month? What is one small thing you're going to do to say, like, I really want to dive deep and think about unlearning something so I can relearn or repave the way for something new. So I will leave folks actually like maybe a couple of minutes to do that. I don't know if we wanted to do any other Q&A or other things while folks kind of come up with their commitment, then we can review them maybe at the end.
Cool.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, drop in your answer this question, or drop in any questions, and we can kind of wind down.
Yeah. See, we don't have any questions from the audience at the moment on the Menti side. I think I saw a few things come through on LinkedIn that maybe comments that I mentioned, but maybe now's a good time if anyone wants to add anything to the Q&A through Menti or through LinkedIn chat, and then we can make sure we have a minute to answer them.
Now keep an eye out on LinkedIn.
Great.
And where I'm not seeing it on this screen, but the folks see it on their phone, I guess, the question area.
Is it not showing up? That could be something on my end. Give me 1 second here. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no worries. Because it's a solid feature.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just 3%, reshare. Thank you for that catch. I think it was an error on my side. Let's find out.
You had 80%.
Okay. I did 80%, right? Not, and I didn't double check that feature, but is it showing up? Okay, great. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for calling that out. No wonder there was no questions. No one could ask any questions.
So bottom right corner, you see the chat box. I guess that's the
exactly.
That's where you would tap.
I'm sure
add some questions.
It'll pop up with some numbers if folks have questions.
Stop trading things most.
Oof. Yep. whoever wrote that, I just want to say, I feel like it is the thing that I coach leaders on the most, and I do the worst at myself. So I appreciate you calling that out. I needed to see that today. So thank you.
The shoemaker's children go barefoot kind of deal.
Right? I'm always like, yeah, make sure you do that. And then here it's like, no, sometimes we can respond. We don't have to always react. Things can take a minute, but. Ooh, rescheduling any meetings that are meant to keep people informed. Meet instead when you need to collaborate and inform async. Love it. And like, how do you still do this while we're checking for understanding and making spaces for questions? Like, that's what I think is part of that interesting switch over is like, yes, we want to be doing that async, but we also want to make sure there's accountability that people are reading it and that they're getting the clarification needed. And so I find, to me, that's the constant balance that's through trial and error to help us get there.
Yeah.
Ooh, repeating what I did last year for some cultural things. Sometimes it is easier to say what we did last year as a starting point rather than starting with new ideas. Patty, I reference books a lot, but like Patty McCord in the book Powerful, she talks about like beware of the smoke of nostalgia and this idea of like, what we did or how that happened. And it's like this whole, and it can really hold us back from just saying like, what am I doing now looking forward? Obviously, we want to learn from the past. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. But like, again, where is that balance with those things? So we have a readiness to look forward and think in a new way.
Beware the smoke of nostalgia. I love that.
I know. I quote it a lot.
Yeah.
Especially as I think, so like Menti is in a scale up moment, and I've been at other organizations that are scaling up. I think that's especially true. Like what worked for 50 or 60 might not work for 400, that might not work for 1,000. Or what worked with a team with a certain level of domain expertise. But as they've grown in their roles, things need to change. Like things are constantly changing around us, but it's like, do you remember like the good old days, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, anytime we did performance reviews or like engagement surveys, there was just like half of it is just like, remember how we used to do this when it was better and I liked it because there was this moment in time and you never get back to it. Yeah. But it's like, to your point, like we could be doing cool new things as well, and you don't need to like appreciate it for what it was, but understand it's always going to change.
Absolutely. And like traditions are important, like, right? So it's not to say not to keep some of those things, but I think it's to really evaluate them and say, are they continually important? Are they still doing what we want them to do? And if so, then it's like double down on a yes. But if not, let's maybe question it and see what else, if we didn't do that, what would it make room for?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, we got a question, looks like.
What are some of the things that you have had to unlearn in the past? And if so, how did it go for you? That's a great question. I'm going to give it just a moment, actually. And the reason I will say this, and I mean this so sincerely, is like is so many. I'm thinking particularly about my journey joining Menti, so I'm going to take a moment. I will say that. I think that's one of the biggest things. We were talking when we joined this call that we use Menti for everything. So team meeting, all hands, any presentation, anytime I'm teaching. So I've always been a facilitator that has loved to respond to what's happening in the room. But I would say that I probably had 80% of the content prepared. 90%, I kind of knew where it was going to go and what I was going to say. And through my adult learning journey, it was like very learning objective focused. I'm going to measure the learning that I intended to happen. And when I joined Menti and I started using a tool where from the very beginning of almost every like training that I do or learning activity that I do, I start with saying like, why are you here? What do you already know? What would be the most useful for you? Has really made me think about being more grounded in my own values and my own knowledge versus just preparing for a particular session and being willing to go where the conversation needs to go and like letting go of control a little bit and getting ready to get an anonymous question that I might not know the answer to straight away. But I think that has really enhanced my leadership style and my leadership skills to be able to do that. But it was a huge unlearning. I used to take so much pride in preparing for any possible situation that might come my way in a training versus letting go and saying us creating this alert environment together, getting the collective intelligence in the room is going to help us all go further. than me directing something on my own, but it takes a lot of vulnerability and a bit of risk to do that. So that's like, and I'm still on that journey. Yeah. Great question. I think that's the only one that came in here.
Yeah.
So
Carved
good.
out a decent chunk of time though, and this was awesome. What's left? What's left to the presentation?
That's it. That's the last one.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, folks. Thanks, Samantha, for doing this. This was awesome. Always love hearing you speak, whether it's in person at your office or online virtually now. So we've checked off both boxes there. Any final thoughts or recommendations for folks in that are still on or going to watch this later in terms of learning more about Menti or connecting with you or anything like that?
Yeah, great. Thank you everyone for being here. And taking the time to do this. I know we're all saying time constraints. It's like you've chosen to carve out a chunk of time to think about this. Like to me, that is a huge part of the battle. So it's thinking about not, there's so much to do in so many places. What is my invitation to you is just like one thing you can do. And then when that's done, what's one more? Please, yes, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think is my LinkedIn shared, or I can share it. Absolutely. And I would love to connect or chat further about this or about Menti, about what we do, our core values I was talking about, our ways of working, or the product itself. So thank you so much for having me. It's always such a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks. I think the easiest way for people to connect with you is maybe you drop a comment in the event thread and folks can find you that way.
Thank you. I will do that.
That's probably the low-hanging fruit on that one. But no, thanks again. And have an awesome rest of your day, everyone.
All right. Cheers, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.